My name is FANATIC. I'm a Grammy Award-winning producer. Had my own label, Sixborough Entertainment, back from it was the early 90s, 94, 93, 94. Had an artist on the label by the name of Omniscience, which Dope Folks is now distributing his catalog. Also produced records on Michael Jackson, Beyonce, Little Kim, b.i.g, Anthony Hamilton, Will Smith. Been producing for a while. Raheem Devon, a couple of different people. And here I am now. I'm an actual recording artist as well now. So venturing into that side of the game. So been producing cats for so long, and now it's time for me to step in the forefront and take everything that I've learned from those artists that I've worked with and pursue my artistry as well. I actually started out in school in electronic music and learned the basics of recording in that class, and I was in a popular rap group at the time called the Busy Boys, and they were on Payroll Records. I actually was producing, and I didn't even really know I was producing. I actually went to the Art Institute of Atlanta, and then that's when I realized, I studied music business there, and that's when I really realized what I was doing was producing records. Because I was really big on the arrangements and programming and things like that. And at the time, a lot of artists were just freestyling, and for us, our group, we had choruses and we had songs and we had song structure and things like that, which that's what I had implemented into the group, and it allowed us to stand out amongst a lot of the other artists that we performed with and that we went up against. So like when the big artists from New York City would come down and do the shows, like Biz Markie, Big Daddy Kane, and artists like that, they would see that we were a very professional outfit and we were basically on the same level as them, which was hard for them to believe, coming from North Carolina, that we were, you know, able to put records together and songs and record and things like that.
So that led to you connecting with bigger artists?
Yes. We initially developed those relationships there, which they all came through North Carolina. That was a big market for a lot of New York hip-hop acts. They knew if they came to the South, they could make a lot of money because we didn't really have access to them. Whereas in New York, you only can do the Apollo but so many times. So they would come through the South and do shows and club dates on a regular basis. So it allowed us to establish rapport with them, which later on, those relationships were utilized as I started producing more established acts in New York City. I was like the first one to have the emulator SP1200, and we did a show with Heavy D and the Boys, and Eddie F turned me on to it, and I was seeing all these incredible things that he was doing with it, bringing in beats and stuff like that. So he turned me on to it. I got the 1200, and actually every record to this day that I've ever made, I still use the 1200 on it because the drums are so dirty and they're so hard, and that's what I really love about that sound. It allowed me to create a signature sound with it. So every record that I do, I still do the drums on the SP1200 and whatnot. But I was just using that and just sampling records, and eventually got a Triton and things like that. But most of the stuff now that I use are just live instruments in the SP1200.
So did you guys share the production duties, or?
No, actually I was like the head producer in the whole camp. I produced all the records. I structured all the records, arranged them for the Busy Boys, for Nowborn. Nowborn had the record Versatility that I produced. n-tyce had the record Take It to the Stage I produced. So I was basically like the staff producer on the label, and I basically produced all the records. But it was a collective effort, and that once I put the track together, it's like I would hand it off to Ski. Ski would write all the lyrics because I trusted in what he was able to do, and he was like deliver like every single time. So it was just a matter of me handing the track off to him once he would come up with the concept for the songs and write the songs and lay his verses, Mixmaster D would come in and put the scratches down on the records and things like that. So the foundation of everything that I learned with the artists, the foundation of everything that I learned with the Busy Boys allowed me to put that same type of information in Omniscient's head and allow him to be the great artist that he became. And moving forward with myself as an artist, that was the foundation for everything, with making records, doing stage shows and things like that. We were like an all-star team, whereas like the DJ was a very intricate part of the show and the recording process, as well as the producer and the songwriter. So we were like a team. I quote unquote was the producer, but we basically all produced the records by contributing what we did to the records. Well, John just happened to be a hip-hop guy that just studied classic hip-hop records from day one. And he originally contacted my DJ Mixmaster D, and I think they did a deal for some Busy Boy records back in the day that were unreleased that I had produced with them. And from there, John inquired about the Sixborough catalog, because after I left Payroll, I started my own label and I produced Omniscience under that. He was the first artist that I signed, and I produced the EP on him. And we eventually ended up getting signed with Elektra Records under Vincent Herbert, Three Boys from Newark, and we worked on a whole album in the Hit Factory under him. It never came out. The deal went south, so a lot of the music that we created during that time period, Dope Folks says, fortunately, they're putting it out for everybody to experience it. And it was just like the golden era of hip-hop and rap music during that time. And so I think it's great that they're putting this music out for everybody to experience it, that, you know, either they didn't know about it or they remember it, and it was just a great time, man. So, you know, I think it's a great thing. You know, it was a very creative period for hip-hop, and nobody was doing the same things. Everybody had their own take on it, their own spin on it. It wasn't one type of hip-hop that was going down. You had the whole Afrocentric movement that happened during that period, where it was influencing what people were writing, and there was a consciousness almost like the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement, when that consciousness of the music and the people and what was going on in the country all affected the music. And the same thing happened during that period with hip-hop. You know, it happened in the 60s, and it happened again during that period of hip-hop, and it affected all the music and what people were writing about and saying. So even if you were a hardcore act, you still were getting conscious rap at the same time in the record. So it wasn't just one thing. Whereas now the artists, if their big thing is about the club, they got 16 cuts about the club, you know, and so it was just more diverse back then with the artists and the content that was on the records. So you would get those records that marked a time period, like you remember what you were doing when you heard this record, you remember where you were at, what you were going through in your life when this record came out, and it affected you. And also, you know, there weren't as many artists coming out. So like I was explaining earlier, it was just like you would get an EPMD record and you would have 3 weeks to live with it and ride with it and soak it in every aspect of it, versus you know, now you got 12 artists coming out every Tuesday, so you don't have a lot of time to really get into the artist and see what the artist is all about. And also, it was like one guest appearance on the record. You know, the album was basically the artist, and they would have like one guest appearance. And so that would allow you to really understand what the artist was all about, what his perspective was, what his music was, you know, just really get into the artist and really become a true fan of the artist by the time you heard the end of the album. Whereas now, they rely on guest appearances so much, where you have 20 different guest appearances on a record, and you can't really understand what the artist is about or what is driving the record and whatnot. So, you know, it's unfortunate that's where it's gone to, but before then, that's the way it was set up. And also, it was a situation where when you put the album out, you would have to buy the whole album, which kind of like forced you to get into their world and find out what they were all about, versus now it's like a single driven market where you hear one record and the album is whatever, you know what I'm saying? You're not really checking for the album and whatnot. They're not complete albums, really, you know. Well, my current record, I'm doing, I'm singing now, so it's more of a pop rock record. Put you in the mind of Willie Moon or Neon Trees or something like that. It's like a crossbreed of everything that I grew up on, which the beauty of hip hop is that it exposes you to so many different genres of music. So if like you were into jazz, the whole Tribe Called Quest movement came, and everybody was sampling jazz. So you spent a good year digging in the crates and buying all kinds of jazz records and getting exposed to all kinds of jazz artists. And back then, you know, there was a label called CTI, and CTI had like an all-star lineup playing on the record. So you would have like 20 great musicians playing on one record, and all the albums were like that. So you got exposed to, all right, well, who was playing saxophone on this record? So it might be a Bob James album, but Grover Washington Jr. might have played on the album as well. So then you would go find the Grover Washington Jr. album and see who was playing on it. And the same thing with soul. You would see a James Brown record and you would find out who was playing on the record, and then you would go look for, okay, Bobby Byrd is singing backgrounds on this record, so you would go look for Bobby Byrd's solo records or Marvin Whitley or whoever, you know what I'm saying? It was just about getting exposed to different genres. It was jazz, and it was the whole James Brown movement with soul records. Then you got into sampling 70s classic rock. So all of those things exposed me to so many different genres of music. And you know, back then it was like the rock artists were doing their version of R&B music and soul music, but it was just very pop because it was rock. So you got exposed to all these genres, which is allowing me to incorporate that into my music now. So my album has a crossbreed of hip hop in it. It has rock in it. It has opera in it. It has gospel. It has jazz. It has all these different elements in there that allow you to bring a wide audience to your music and whatnot. So if you're a fan of hip hop, you hear the beats under the music that makes you, you know, want to check it out. You hear the rock elements with the guitars on it. So if you're into rock, you're checking it out. So you're bringing a whole audience of people together to experience your music.